The Arab millionaire tested his maid with an open safe, but the result left him speechless. Get ready for one of the most incredible stories you'll ever hear, a tale that will completely change how you see trust, loyalty, and the true meaning of wealth. Today, we're diving into a story that proves sometimes the most valuable treasures aren't made of gold or diamonds, but of something far more precious. If this story touches your heart like I know it will, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell, because you won't want to miss incredible stories like this one. Trust me, what you're about to discover will stay with you forever. Let's begin. The scorching Dubai sun cast long shadows across the pristine marble floors of the Al Rashid mansion, one of the most opulent residences in the exclusive Emirates Hills district. The morning call to prayer had just ended, its haunting melody still echoing faintly across the city as the metropolis awakened to another day of unprecedented prosperity and ambition. Palm trees swayed gently in the desert breeze outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, their fronds creating dancing patterns of light and shadow across the immaculate interior of a home that represented the pinnacle of Middle Eastern luxury. Ahmed al-Rashid stood in his private study on the third floor, surveying his domain with the satisfaction of a man who had built an empire from nothing more than determination, intelligence, and an unwavering belief in his own destiny. At 42, he was the embodiment of modern Arab success, tall, distinguished, with the kind of presence that commanded respect in boardrooms from Dubai to London to New York. His perfectly trimmed beard was touched with silver at the temples, lending him an air of wisdom that complemented his sharp business acumen, while his dark eyes held the calculating intensity of someone who had never lost a negotiation that truly mattered. The study itself was a testament to his achievements and cultural heritage. Ancient Persian carpets worth hundreds of thousands of dollars covered the polished marble floors, while hand-carved Lebanese cedar bookcases lined the walls, filled with first-edition books in Arabic, English, and French. A magnificent crystal chandelier from Bohemia hung from the coffered ceiling, casting prismatic rainbows across the room when the morning sun struck it just right. But the true centerpiece of the room was the massive mahogany desk that had once belonged to a 19th-century Ottoman pasha, behind which Ahmed conducted the business that had made him one of the wealthiest men in the United Arab Emirates. Al Rashid Industries, the conglomerate he had built over the past 2 decades, spanned real estate, shipping, technology, and renewable energy. His name graced towers in downtown Dubai. His ships carried cargo across the Indian Ocean and Mediterranean Sea, and his investments had helped fund everything from solar farms in Morocco to tech startups in Silicon Valley. Forbes estimated his net worth at $2.8 billion, making him not just wealthy by regional standards, but by global ones. He owned homes in London, Geneva, and the French Riviera, a collection of classic cars that included 3 Rolls-Royces and a 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing, and a yacht that was regularly featured in luxury lifestyle magazines. But despite his enormous success and the respect he commanded in business circles across the Middle East and beyond, Ahmed had learned through bitter experience that wealth attracted not just opportunity, but also those who would exploit trust for personal gain. His first marriage had ended in a spectacularly expensive divorce when he discovered his wife had been systematically stealing from him while conducting an affair with his then business partner. His second marriage had lasted only 18 months before ending, when his wife's gambling addiction resulted in the disappearance of several $1 million from accounts she had access to. His third marriage had been the most painful of all. A woman he had genuinely loved, who had been secretly selling information about his business dealings to competitors while presenting herself as his devoted partner. These betrayals had left scars deeper than any physical wound, teaching Ahmed that trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. Over the years, he had developed an intricate system of checks, balances, and tests designed to evaluate the character and loyalty of everyone in his orbit, from business partners to household staff. It was a cold, calculating approach to human relationships, but it had protected him from further devastating betrayals while allowing him to build his empire with the confidence that comes from knowing exactly where everyone around you stands. The household staff of the Al Rashid mansion was no exception to this systematic evaluation. Each employee underwent extensive background checks that went far beyond the normal verification of references and criminal history. Ahmed employed a private investigation firm to compile detailed dossiers on every person who worked in his home, tracking their financial situations, family relationships, personal habits, and any potential vulnerabilities that might make them susceptible to bribery or coercion by his enemies. It was an expensive and time-consuming process, but Ahmed considered it essential insurance against the kind of betrayals that had cost him so dearly in the past. The current staff consisted of 12 carefully vetted individuals, each assigned specific duties and areas of responsibility within the mansion's daily operations. There was Hassan, the head butler who had worked for Ahmed for 8 years and had proven his discretion by turning down several lucrative offers from competitors seeking inside information about the Al Rashid business operations. There was Fatima, the head cook, whose culinary skills were matched only by her absolute loyalty. She had once refused a bribe of $50,000 from a business rival who wanted her to slip a mild sedative into Ahmed's food before an important negotiation. There was Abdullah, the head of security, whose military background and unshakable integrity had been demonstrated when he reported his own nephew's attempt to gain unauthorized access to the mansion's security codes. There was Mariam, the head housekeeper who managed the cleaning and maintenance staff with military precision while maintaining the kind of absolute discretion that wealthy families required. Each of these employees had proven themselves over years of service, demonstrating not just competence in their duties, but the kind of unwavering loyalty that Ahmed valued above all other qualities. But among all the staff members, none intrigued Ahmed more than Yasmin Hassan, a 28-year-old Palestinian woman who had been working as a housemaid in his residence for the past 6 months. Unlike the other employees who had been hired through the usual channels of employment agencies and personal recommendations, Yasmin had come to his attention through an extraordinary set of circumstances that had immediately marked her as different from the typical domestic worker. Ahmed had first encountered Yasmin at a charity event for Palestinian refugees at the Emirates Humanitarian Foundation in Dubai. She had been there not as a guest, but as a volunteer translator, helping elderly refugees navigate the paperwork required to access medical care and educational opportunities for their children. What had caught Ahmed's attention was not just her fluent command of Arabic, English, and French, but the gentle dignity with which she treated each person who sought her help, taking time to explain complex procedures and offering emotional support to families who were struggling with the bureaucratic maze of refugee assistance. When Ahmed had approached her after observing her work for nearly an hour, he had been struck by her composure and intelligence. She spoke with the cultured accent of someone who had received an excellent education, yet there was a humility about her that suggested life had taught her difficult lessons about pride and survival. Her appearance was modest but elegant. She wore a simple black dress and hijab that somehow managed to be both conservative and sophisticated, and when she smiled, which she did frequently while helping the refugees, her entire face lit up in a way that made everyone around her feel more at ease. "You speak French beautifully," Ahmed had said to her in that language, testing both her linguistic abilities and her reaction to being addressed by someone who was clearly wealthy and powerful. "Where did you learn it?" Yasmin had responded, without the deference that Ahmed usually encountered from people of modest means. "At the Sorbonne," she had said simply. I studied international law there for 2 years before circumstances required me to return home. The answer had intrigued Ahmed enormously. A Palestinian woman with Sorbonne training working as a volunteer translator at a refugee aid center suggested a story with layers of complexity that he wanted to understand. "And what brings you to Dubai?" he had asked. "The same thing that brings everyone here," Yasmin had replied with a slight smile that suggested both hope and resignation. The possibility of a better future. Their conversation had been brief. Yasmin had needed to return to her translation duties, and Ahmed had other obligations that evening. But something about her had stayed with him long after the event ended. The following week, he had instructed his head of personnel to discreetly investigate her background and, if she was interested and suitable, to offer her a position in his household. The investigation had revealed a story that was both tragic and inspiring. Yasmin came from an educated middle-class family in Ramallah. Her father had been a professor of literature at Birzeit University, and her mother had been a pediatric nurse at a local hospital. Yasmin herself had been an exceptional student, earning a scholarship to study international law at the Sorbonne, with dreams of eventually working for international human rights organizations, or perhaps the United Nations. But during her second year in Paris, the political situation in Palestine had deteriorated dramatically. Her family had been caught up in a conflict that had destroyed their home and cost her father his position at the university. Her mother had been injured in a bombing and required expensive medical treatment that the family could not afford. Yasmin had been forced to abandon her studies and return home to care for her parents and help support her 2 younger brothers who were still in school. For 3 years, she had worked whatever jobs she could find, teaching French and English to local students, working as a translator for international aid organizations, even working in a textile factory when nothing else was available. But the economic situation in Palestine had continued to deteriorate, and when her mother's medical condition worsened, requiring treatment that was not available locally, Yasmin had made the difficult decision to seek work abroad, where she could earn enough money to support her family's medical and educational expenses. She had come to Dubai on a domestic workers visa, a designation that allowed her to work legally in the UAE, but came with restrictions and social stigma that someone of her education and background might normally find difficult to accept. However, Yasmin had approached her circumstances with a pragmatism and dignity that Ahmed found remarkable. She understood that her current situation was temporary, a necessary step in a longer journey toward rebuilding her family's stability, and perhaps eventually returning to her interrupted legal studies. When Ahmed's personnel director had approached her about the position in the Al-Rashid household, Yasmin had accepted gratefully, but without the excessive enthusiasm that Ahmed had learned to be suspicious of. She understood that working for one of Dubai's wealthiest families was a significant opportunity, but she also made it clear that she viewed the position as employment, not charity, and that she intended to earn her salary through hard work and dedicated service. Her first few months in the Al-Rashid household had exceeded all expectations. Yasmin's work was impeccable. She had an attention to detail that rivaled the most experienced housekeepers, combined with an efficiency that suggested someone accustomed to managing multiple responsibilities simultaneously. Her education was evident in the way she organized her tasks, approached problems with systematic thinking, and communicated with both other staff members, and occasionally with Ahmed himself, when household matters required his attention. But what truly set Yasmin apart from other employees was her character. In a household where Ahmed had learned to expect that everyone had some kind of angle, some personal agenda that might eventually conflict with his interests, Yasmin seemed genuinely focused simply on doing her job well and earning an honest living. She was friendly with the other staff members, but maintained appropriate professional boundaries. She was respectful toward Ahmed, but not obsequious, treating him with the courtesy due to her employer without the artificial deference that often concealed ulterior motives. Most importantly, Yasmin had already passed several informal tests of her integrity. Ahmed routinely left small amounts of money in various locations around the house, not as traps, but as indicators of staff honesty. Bills left in jacket pockets, coins scattered on dresser tops, even larger amounts occasionally left on his desk when he was called away from his study unexpectedly. In every case, Yasmin had either left the money untouched or, when it was clearly out of place, had turned it over to Hassan, the head butler, with a note explaining where she had found it. She had also demonstrated remarkable discretion regarding the business conversations and phone calls she inevitably overheard while cleaning Ahmed's study and other areas of the house. Unlike previous staff members who had sometimes asked curious questions about his work or made casual comments that revealed they had been listening to private conversations, Yasmin seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to be present without being intrusive, to clean and organize his spaces while remaining completely uninterested in the confidential information that surrounded her daily. But Ahmed's experiences with betrayal had taught him that even the most apparently trustworthy people could be corrupted under the right circumstances. The women who had betrayed him most deeply had all initially appeared to be paragons of virtue and loyalty. They had passed smaller tests of character before eventually revealing that their integrity had limits that could be exceeded when the stakes became high enough or the temptations became irresistible. This knowledge had led Ahmed to develop what he privately called the ultimate test, an evaluation so comprehensive and so challenging that it would reveal the true character of anyone who encountered it. He had used this test only 3 times in the past 10 years, and all 3 subjects had failed it in ways that had both disappointed and educated him about the depths of human greed and self-interest. The test was designed not just to measure honesty, but to evaluate judgment, priorities, and the strength of moral character when faced with life-changing temptation. As Ahmed stood in his study on this particular morning, reviewing the financial reports from his various business ventures, he found himself thinking once again about Yasmin and wondering whether she would prove to be different from all the others. 6 months of exemplary service and numerous small displays of integrity had earned his cautious respect, but Ahmed had learned not to fully trust anyone until they had been subjected to the ultimate evaluation of their character. The decision to test Yasmin had been building in his mind for several weeks, prompted by a conversation he had overheard between her and Mariam, the head housekeeper. Yasmin had been explaining that she needed to request a small advance on her salary because her mother required additional medical treatment that the family could not afford to delay. The conversation had been conducted in Arabic, and Yasmin had clearly not realized that Ahmed was nearby and could hear every word. What had struck him about the conversation was not just Yasmin's obvious concern for her mother's health, but the way she had explained her family's financial situation to Mariam. There had been no self-pity in her voice, no attempt to manipulate sympathy, just a straightforward explanation of circumstances and a respectful request for help that she clearly hoped would be approved, but would understand if it were denied. Mariam had, of course, approved the advance immediately. Such requests were routine and well within her authority to grant. But Ahmed had been impressed by the dignity with which Yasmin had made her request. The incident had also reminded Ahmed of just how modest Yasmin's salary was, and how much difference a significant amount of money might make in her life and her family's circumstances. It had started him thinking about whether her apparent integrity was simply the result of never having been faced with truly overwhelming temptation. Would her honesty survive if she were confronted with an opportunity to solve all of her family's financial problems with a single decision? Would her moral principles prove stronger than the desperation that came from watching a parent suffer due to lack of money for medical care? These questions had led Ahmed to plan the most comprehensive version of his ultimate test, one that would not only evaluate Yasmin's honesty, but also her judgment, her priorities, and her ability to maintain her principles even when faced with circumstances that would tempt almost anyone to compromise their values. It would be a test that went far beyond simple theft prevention to examine the very core of who she was as a person. The test itself would revolve around Ahmed's personal safe, a massive German-engineered vault built into the wall of his study behind a reproduction of a 15th-century Persian miniature painting. The safe contained not just money and jewelry, but also important business documents, contracts, and other materials that represented different kinds of value and opportunity. More importantly, it contained specific items that Ahmed had carefully selected and placed there specifically for this evaluation. Items that would create a comprehensive test of character that would reveal everything he needed to know about Yasmin's true nature. Over the years, Ahmed had learned that the most effective tests of character were those that appeared to be accidents or coincidences rather than deliberate evaluations. People behaved differently when they knew they were being tested versus when they believed they were facing real-world circumstances with real-world consequences. The key was to create a situation that felt completely natural and unplanned, where the subject's reactions would be genuine rather than calculated for effect. Ahmed's plan was elegant in its simplicity and comprehensive in its scope. He would arrange for Yasmin to discover the safe accidentally left open while she was cleaning his study, with its contents fully visible and accessible. But unlike the simple money-based tests he had used with other employees, this safe would contain a variety of different temptations, each designed to evaluate a different aspect of her character and moral reasoning. There would be cash, of course, enough money to solve her family's immediate medical bills and provide financial security for several years. But there would also be jewelry that could be easily concealed and sold without detection, business documents that competitors would pay handsomely to obtain, and most crucially, a document that appeared to be Ahmed's will, which would test whether Yasmin would be tempted to gain advanced knowledge of inheritance decisions that might affect her future employment. The test would also include what appeared to be a handwritten letter from Ahmed to his lawyer, discussing his growing doubts about the loyalty of his household staff and his plans to replace several employees he suspected of stealing from him. The letter would specifically mention that he was considering terminating Yasmin's employment due to suspicious behavior he had observed, creating a scenario where she would be faced not just with temptation, but with apparent injustice that might justify taking action to protect herself. The complexity of the test was designed to evaluate not just Yasmin's honesty, but her judgment, priorities, and moral reasoning under pressure. A simple theft of money might be explained by desperation or momentary weakness of character, but how someone responded to multiple different temptations, combined with apparent threats to their security and perceived injustices, would reveal the deeper patterns of their moral decision-making process. Ahmed spent the morning finalizing his preparations for the test. He arranged for a business meeting that would take him out of the house for several hours, during which time Yasmin would be scheduled to clean his study. He carefully arranged the contents of the safe to create maximum visual impact. Stacks of cash in multiple currencies, jewelry cases opened to display their contents, important-looking documents spread across the safe's shelves in a way that suggested they had been hastily accessed and not properly secured. The amount of cash he placed in the safe was carefully calculated to be life-changing for someone in Yasmin's circumstances, but not so large as to be completely unbelievable. $50,000 in US currency, £20,000 sterling, and 30,000 euros. Enough money to pay for her mother's medical treatment, support her family for several years, and perhaps even allow Yasmin to return to her legal studies at the Sorbonne. It was precisely the amount that would represent not just temptation, but salvation for her family's circumstances. The jewelry was equally carefully chosen, pieces that were valuable but not so distinctive that they would be difficult to sell, items that could realistically be concealed and removed from the house without detection. A diamond tennis bracelet worth approximately $30,000, a set of emerald earrings valued at $25,000, and a vintage Cartier watch that could easily be worth $50,000 to the right collector. The business documents were real, but carefully selected to be valuable to competitors without being so sensitive that their theft would cause catastrophic damage to Ahmed's businesses. Financial projections for upcoming deals, client contact lists, and strategic plans that would be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to his rivals, but would not destroy his empire if they were compromised. But the centerpiece of the test was the fabricated personal correspondence that would create emotional and psychological pressure beyond simple financial temptation. The fake letter to his lawyer described Yasmin in terms that would be both hurtful and alarming, questioning her motives for working in his household, speculating about her possible connections to competitors or journalists, and outlining plans to terminate her employment while ensuring that she would be unable to find similar work elsewhere in Dubai. The letter was written in Ahmed's own handwriting, using language and phrasing that matched his normal correspondence style. It described specific incidents that had supposedly aroused his suspicion, conversations Yasmin had allegedly had with other staff members, questions she had supposedly asked about his business affairs, and behaviors that he purportedly interpreted as evidence of disloyalty or ulterior motives. None of the incidents described in the letter had actually occurred, but they were crafted to be believable and consistent with the kind of paranoid thinking that wealthy individuals often developed about their employees. The psychological impact of discovering such a letter would be devastating for anyone in Yasmin's position. Not only would it suggest that her job security was in immediate jeopardy, but it would also indicate that her employer viewed her with suspicion and contempt despite her months of dedicated service. The letter specifically mentioned Ahmed's plans to contact other wealthy families in Dubai to warn them against hiring Yasmin, effectively threatening to destroy her ability to earn a living in her chosen field. The genius of including this fabricated correspondence in the test was that it created a scenario where taking money or documents could be psychologically justified as self-defense rather than simple theft. If Ahmed truly planned to destroy her career and leave her unable to support her family, then taking enough money to survive his persecution could be rationalized as necessary self-preservation rather than greed or dishonesty. This aspect of the test was designed to evaluate whether Yasmin's integrity was absolute or conditional, whether her honesty was based on principled moral beliefs that would hold firm even under extreme pressure, or whether it was simply a practical strategy that she would abandon when circumstances became desperate enough to justify more aggressive action. Ahmed had learned from his previous betrayals that the most dangerous people were often those who could rationalize their betrayals as justified responses to unfair treatment. His ex-wives had all convinced themselves that their theft and deception were somehow warranted by his perceived failings as a husband, rather than acknowledging their actions as simple greed or disloyalty. He wanted to know whether Yasmin would maintain her integrity even when faced with circumstances that might justify compromise, or whether she would prove capable of the same kind of self-serving rationalization that had characterized his previous betrayers. The final element of the test was a surveillance system that would record every moment of Yasmin's time in the study, capturing not just her actions, but her facial expressions, body language, and emotional reactions to each discovery. Ahmed had invested in state-of-the-art hidden cameras that would provide multiple angles and high-definition recording of everything that occurred, allowing him to analyze not just what Yasmin did, but how she processed the various temptations and threats she encountered. The surveillance system was designed to be completely undetectable. Cameras hidden in books, picture frames, and decorative objects throughout the study, with audio recording capabilities that would capture even whispered conversations or reactions. Ahmed would be able to review every second of Yasmin's time in the room, analyzing her decision-making process and understanding the reasoning behind her choices. As the morning progressed and the time for the test approached, Ahmed found himself experiencing an unexpected mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Part of him hoped that Yasmin would prove to be different from all the others, that she would demonstrate the kind of absolute integrity that would allow him to trust someone completely for the first time in years. But another part of him, the part that had been shaped by repeated betrayals and disappointments, expected that she would ultimately prove to be no different from anyone else when faced with overwhelming temptation and apparent necessity. At 11 o'clock, Ahmed made a final inspection of his study, ensuring that every element of the test was perfectly positioned and that the surveillance equipment was functioning properly. The safe stood open like a treasure cave from an Arabian Nights story, its contents glittering under the study's carefully positioned lighting. The fabricated letter lay prominently among the business documents, positioned so that it would be immediately visible to anyone looking into the safe. Everything was ready for what would either be a vindication of his growing faith in Yasmin's character, or yet another confirmation that trust was a luxury he could not afford. Ahmed left the house at 11:30, ostensibly for a business meeting at his downtown office building. In reality, he drove to a small cafe 10 minutes away, where he had set up a temporary monitoring station on his laptop that would allow him to watch the surveillance feeds in real time. He ordered coffee and positioned himself at a corner table where he could observe the screens without being seen by other customers, then settled in to wait for what promised to be one of the most revealing hours of his recent life. At exactly noon, Hassan, the head butler, knocked on the study door to inform Yasmin that Mr. Al-Rashid had left for his meeting and that she could begin her cleaning duties. Ahmed watched on his laptop screen as Yasmin entered the room, carrying her cleaning supplies, moving with the same quiet efficiency that had characterized her work since she had joined the household staff. For the first few minutes, everything proceeded normally. Yasmin began her usual cleaning routine, dusting the bookshelves and organizing papers on Ahmed's desk. She moved with practiced grace, her attention focused on her tasks, showing no indication that she had noticed anything unusual about the room. Ahmed found himself unconsciously holding his breath as he watched her work, waiting for the moment when she would turn around and see the open safe behind her. When the moment finally came, it was more dramatic than Ahmed had anticipated. Yasmin had been cleaning the small Persian miniature that concealed the safe when she noticed that it was slightly askew. As she reached out to straighten the painting, she discovered that it was not properly attached to its hinges. Ahmed had deliberately loosened it to ensure that she would encounter the open safe in a way that seemed completely accidental. The painting swung open under her touch, revealing the safe's contents in all their carefully arranged splendor. Yasmin's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. She gasped audibly, took an involuntary step backward, and stood frozen for several seconds as her mind processed what she was seeing. Ahmed leaned forward in his cafe chair, studying her face on the laptop screen, looking for any sign of greed, calculation, or immediate planning that would indicate how she was processing this unexpected discovery. But what he saw in Yasmin's expression was not greed or excitement, but shock and concern. Her first visible reaction was to look around the room, as if searching for signs of a break-in or some other explanation for why the safe would be left open and unattended. She approached the safe cautiously, not with the eager anticipation of someone who had discovered an opportunity, but with the worried demeanor of someone who had encountered what appeared to be a serious security breach. For several minutes, Yasmin simply stood before the open safe, her hands clasped in front of her, clearly uncertain about what she should do. Ahmed could see her mind working as she considered various possibilities. Had there been a burglary? Had Mr. Al-Rashid left the safe open accidentally? Should she close it immediately and pretend she had never seen it? Or should she report the situation to Hassan or directly to Ahmed himself? Her hesitation was encouraging to Ahmed, but he knew that the real test was yet to come. Many people might have similar initial reactions to discovering an open safe, but behavior often changed once the initial shock wore off and the possibilities became clear. Ahmed had learned not to judge character based on immediate reactions, but on the decisions people made after they had time to think through their options and their potential consequences. After what seemed like an eternity, but was actually only about 3 minutes, Yasmin appeared to make a decision. Instead of immediately closing the safe or leaving the room, she moved closer and began to examine its contents more carefully. Ahmed's heart rate increased as he watched her lean forward, clearly reading the documents and taking inventory of the cash and jewelry that were so prominently displayed. This was the moment of truth, when theoretical temptation became concrete opportunity, when abstract moral principles were confronted with specific life-changing possibilities. Ahmed watched Yasmin's face intently, looking for any sign of the calculation, rationalization, or growing excitement that he had observed in others who had faced similar tests. But what he saw instead continued to surprise him. Yasmin's expression as she examined the safe's contents was not one of greed or opportunity, but of growing concern and confusion. She was clearly reading the documents. Ahmed could see her eyes moving across the pages, taking in their contents with the kind of careful attention that her legal training had taught her. When she reached the fabricated letter about his plans to dismiss her and destroy her career prospects, her reaction was visible and immediate. Her face went pale as she read Ahmed's supposed assessment of her character and his plans for her future. Her hands began to shake slightly, and she had to grip the edge of the safe to steady herself as she processed what appeared to be devastating news about her employment and reputation. Ahmed could see tears forming in her eyes as she read the harsh judgments and unfair accusations that he had crafted specifically to test her emotional and psychological response. But even as he watched Yasmin's obvious distress at discovering what she believed to be her employer's true opinion of her, Ahmed was struck by her continued restraint. Despite learning that Ahmed apparently viewed her with suspicion and contempt, despite discovering that her job security was in immediate jeopardy, despite seeing enough money and valuables to solve all of her family's problems, she made no move to take anything from the safe. Instead, Yasmin carefully backed away from the safe and sat down heavily in one of the leather chairs facing Ahmed's desk. For the next several minutes, she simply sat there, clearly processing the emotional impact of what she had discovered. Ahmed could see her wiping her eyes and taking deep breaths, trying to compose herself after the shock of learning what appeared to be devastating news about her future. Ahmed found himself feeling unexpectedly guilty as he watched Yasmin's genuine distress at the fabricated accusations he had written about her. The letter had been designed to be hurtful and alarming, but seeing her actual emotional response to reading it made Ahmed realize how cruel the test was, regardless of its ultimate purpose. This young woman, who had done nothing but work hard and honestly for 6 months, was experiencing real pain because of lies he had deliberately crafted to manipulate her behavior. But the test was not over, and Ahmed forced himself to continue observing, knowing that Yasmin's next decisions would be the most revealing of all. How would she respond now that the initial shock had passed? Would she take money to protect herself against the unfair treatment she believed was coming? Would she steal documents to use as leverage against Ahmed, or to sell to his competitors in revenge for his harsh assessment of her character? Or would she find some other way to respond to what appeared to be a hopeless situation? After sitting in contemplation for nearly 10 minutes, Yasmin stood up and returned to the open safe. Ahmed leaned forward in his chair, expecting that this would be the moment when temptation finally overcame principle, when desperation would drive her to take actions that her conscience would normally prevent. He had seen this pattern before. Initial restraint followed by gradual rationalization that eventually led to taking what seemed to be justified by circumstances. But instead of reaching for the money or jewelry, Yasmin did something that completely surprised Ahmed. She began carefully organizing the safe's contents, straightening the papers that appeared to have been hastily arranged, closing the jewelry cases that had been left open, and stacking the currency neatly instead of leaving it scattered across the shelves. She was not taking anything. She was securing everything properly, organizing the safe's contents with the same attention to detail that she brought to all of her work. Ahmed watched in fascination as Yasmin spent nearly 15 minutes methodically organizing everything in the safe. She handled the money and jewelry with the same careful respect she showed toward all of Ahmed's possessions, treating the valuable items as if they were delicate artifacts that required gentle handling rather than tempting prizes that she could easily conceal and steal. Her movements were calm and purposeful, showing no sign of the trembling excitement that would indicate internal conflict between desire and conscience. When she had finished organizing the safe's contents, Yasmin pulled out her mobile phone and took several photographs of the interior, documenting exactly how everything was arranged. Ahmed realized that she was creating evidence to protect herself. If anything went missing from the safe later, she would be able to prove exactly what had been there and how it had been positioned when she found it. It was a brilliant defensive strategy that demonstrated both her legal training and her understanding of how vulnerable her position was as a domestic worker who might be accused of theft. After taking the photographs, Yasmin carefully closed the safe and repositioned the Persian miniature painting to conceal it properly. She then spent several minutes examining the painting's mounting system, apparently trying to understand how it had come loose in the first place. Ahmed could see her testing the hinges and brackets, clearly puzzled by the apparent mechanical failure that had caused such a serious security breach. Finally, Yasmin returned to her cleaning duties, completing her normal routine as if nothing unusual had happened. But Ahmed could see that she was deeply troubled by what she had experienced. Her movements were more careful than usual, and she frequently glanced toward the concealed safe, as if worried that the security breach might somehow recur. When she finished cleaning the study, she gathered her supplies and left the room, closing the door firmly behind her. Ahmed continued watching the surveillance feeds for another 30 minutes, but nothing further happened in the study. Yasmin did not return, and no other staff members entered the room. Whatever she was going to do in response to her discovery, it would apparently happen outside the study itself. Ahmed closed his laptop and drove back to his house, his mind racing with questions about what he had observed. Yasmin's behavior had been completely different from what he had expected based on his previous experiences with testing people's integrity. She had been presented with overwhelming temptation, devastating personal information, and what appeared to be impending injustice, yet she had taken nothing and had actually improved the security of his safe by properly organizing and closing it. But Ahmed also knew that the test was not necessarily over. Yasmin's immediate behavior had been admirable, but he needed to understand what her longer-term response would be. Would she report the security breach to Hassan or directly to him? Would she confront him about the harsh assessment she had supposedly discovered? Would she begin looking for other employment in anticipation of being dismissed? Or would she perhaps do something more subtle, like selling information about the safe's contents or his security procedures to competitors or criminals? When Ahmed arrived home, he went directly to his study and checked the safe. Everything was exactly as Yasmin had left it. Perfectly organized, completely secure, with nothing missing. The photographs on her phone would confirm that she had left everything exactly as she had found it, with the only change being improved organization and security. Over the next several hours, Ahmed observed Yasmin's behavior carefully through the household's normal surveillance systems. She went about her usual duties with the same efficiency and professionalism that had always characterized her work, but he could see that she was troubled by something. She was quieter than usual during her lunch break, and she seemed to be deep in thought whenever she thought no one was observing her. At approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Hassan knocked on Ahmed's study door and requested a private meeting. Ahmed's pulse quickened. This was likely Yasmin's response to her discovery, communicated through proper channels rather than directly. Hassan's expression was serious as he entered the study and closed the door behind him. "Mr. Al-Rashid," Hassan began formally, "I need to report a security concern that was brought to my attention by Yasmin Hassan." Ahmed nodded, trying to maintain a neutral expression despite his curiosity about how Yasmin had chosen to handle the situation. "What kind of security concern?" "Miss Hassan discovered that the safe in your study was left open this morning while she was cleaning," Hassan explained. "She was very concerned about the security breach and asked me to inform you immediately. She has taken photographs documenting the contents and their arrangement to ensure that nothing could be alleged to be missing." Ahmed was impressed by the thoroughness and intelligence of Yasmin's response. By reporting the incident through Hassan and providing photographic evidence, she had protected herself against any possible accusation while ensuring that Ahmed was aware of what appeared to be a serious security failure. It was exactly the kind of professional, thoughtful response that someone with legal training might devise. "Did she mention anything else about the incident?" Ahmed asked. Hassan hesitated for a moment, then continued. "She asked me to convey her apologies if she had done anything to cause concern about her work or her loyalty. She said that she hoped there had been some misunderstanding about her performance, and that she was committed to proving herself worthy of the trust you had placed in her." Ahmed felt a stab of guilt at Hassan's words. Yasmin's response to reading the fabricated letter had not been anger or thoughts of revenge, but concern that she might have unknowingly done something to deserve her employer's harsh judgment. Even believing that Ahmed viewed her with suspicion and planned to destroy her career, her primary concern was about proving herself worthy of trust rather than protecting herself against unfair treatment. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Hassan," Ahmed said carefully. "Please ask Miss Hassan to see me in my study at 6 o'clock this evening. I believe there may indeed be some misunderstandings that need to be clarified." Hassan nodded and withdrew, leaving Ahmed alone to contemplate what had become the most revealing test of character he had ever conducted. Yasmin had faced overwhelming temptation, devastating personal information, and apparent injustice, yet her response had been to protect her employer's interests, maintain her professional integrity, and seek to understand how she might have fallen short of expectations, rather than looking for ways to retaliate or protect herself. It was a response that suggested not just honesty, but wisdom, maturity, and the kind of moral courage that remained steady even under extreme pressure. Ahmed realized that he had not just been testing Yasmin's integrity. He had been witnessing a demonstration of character that was unlike anything he had encountered in his previous relationships or business dealings. As 6 o'clock approached, Ahmed found himself more nervous than he had been in years. He was about to face a young woman whom he had subjected to a cruel and manipulative test, a woman who had proved herself to be everything he had hoped to find, but had begun to believe did not exist. How could he explain his actions without revealing the depth of his cynicism and distrust? How could he apologize for the pain he had caused while also acknowledging the extraordinary character she had demonstrated? At exactly 6 o'clock, Hassan knocked on the study door and announced Yasmin's arrival. She entered the room with the same quiet dignity that had always characterized her presence, but Ahmed could see the concern and uncertainty in her eyes. She believed she was about to be dismissed for inadequate performance, yet she carried herself with the composure of someone who was prepared to face whatever consequences awaited her. "Please, sit down, Yasmin," Ahmed said gently, gesturing toward one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "Hassan tells me you discovered a security issue in my study today." Yasmin nodded as she took the offered seat. "Yes, sir. I found the safe open while I was cleaning. I was very concerned about the security breach and wanted to ensure that you were informed immediately." "You handled the situation very professionally," Ahmed said, studying her face carefully. "I understand you took photographs to document the contents?" "Yes, sir," Yasmin replied, pulling out her phone. "I thought it was important to have evidence of exactly what was there and how it was arranged, in case there were any questions later about whether anything was missing." Ahmed nodded approvingly. "That was very intelligent thinking. May I see the photographs?" Yasmin handed over her phone, and Ahmed scrolled through the images she had taken. They were carefully composed and clearly showed every item in the safe, providing comprehensive documentation that would indeed protect her against any possible accusation of theft. But as he looked at the photographs, Ahmed also saw something else that moved him deeply. Among the images of money, jewelry, and business documents, Yasmin had also photographed the fabricated letter about her supposed dismissal. Ahmed realized that she had documented her discovery of what she believed to be devastating personal information about her employer's opinion of her, not because she planned to use it against him, but because she wanted to be completely transparent about everything she had seen and done. "Yasmin," Ahmed said quietly, "I need to tell you something very important. The letter you photographed, the one addressed to my lawyer discussing your employment, was not real." Yasmin looked confused. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't understand." Ahmed took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to reveal would be difficult for both of them. "I deliberately left the safe open this morning as a test. The letter criticizing your work and discussing your dismissal was something I wrote specifically to see how you would respond to finding it. None of the accusations or concerns mentioned in that letter reflect my actual opinion of you or your work." The color drained from Yasmin's face as she processed what Ahmed had told her. "You were testing me." "Yes," Ahmed admitted, feeling the full weight of shame as he saw the hurt and confusion in her eyes. "I have been betrayed many times in the past by people I trusted, and I developed the habit of testing the character of those around me. I wanted to know how you would respond when faced with significant temptation and what appeared to be unfair treatment." Yasmin was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling to understand what she had been subjected to and why. "The money, the jewelry, all of it was arranged to tempt me?" "Yes," Ahmed said. "I wanted to know if you would maintain your integrity even when faced with circumstances that might justify taking action to protect yourself and your family. And the letter saying you planned to destroy my career and prevent me from finding other work?" Ahmed winced at the pain in her voice. "That was designed to test whether you would respond to apparent injustice with retaliation or revenge. I wanted to know if your character would hold firm even when you believed you were being treated unfairly." Yasmin stood up from her chair and walked to the window, looking out at the garden while she processed what she had learned. Ahmed could see her shoulders shaking slightly, and he realized that she was crying, not from relief that the threats to her employment had been fabricated, but from the emotional impact of learning that she had been subjected to such a comprehensive manipulation of her trust and emotions. "I read that letter," she said quietly, her back still turned to Ahmed. "I believed that despite my best efforts, despite working as hard as I could and trying to be worthy of the trust you had placed in me, you saw me as dishonest and disloyal. I believed that not only was I going to lose my job, but that you planned to ensure I could never work for another family like yours again." Ahmed felt sick as he heard the pain in her voice. "I am deeply sorry, Yasmin. I know that what I did was cruel, regardless of my reasons for doing it." Yasmin turned back toward him, and Ahmed could see tears on her cheeks. Do you know what my first thought was when I read that letter? Ahmed shook his head, not trusting himself to speak. My first thought was not about the money I could take, or the documents I could sell, or the ways I might protect myself against your accusations. My first thought was wondering what I had done wrong, and how I could prove to you that your assessment of me was mistaken. The words hit Ahmed like a physical blow. Even believing that he viewed her with suspicion and contempt, even facing what appeared to be the destruction of her career and livelihood, Yasmin's primary concern had been about proving herself worthy of trust rather than protecting herself against unfair treatment. You could have taken enough money to support your family for years, Ahmed said quietly. You could have taken documents that would have been worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to my competitors. You could have justified it as protecting yourself against someone who was treating you unjustly. Yes, Yasmin agreed. I could have done all of those things, but they would have been wrong, regardless of how I justified them to myself. Even if you believed I was planning to destroy your life unfairly. Yasmin looked directly into Ahmed's eyes with an intensity that made him feel as if she was seeing into his soul. Mr. Al-Rashid, my integrity is not conditional on how other people treat me. My honesty is not something I can turn on and off based on whether I think I'm being treated fairly. These are not strategies I use when they benefit me. They are who I am, regardless of the consequences. Ahmed realized that he was witnessing something extraordinary, not just honesty, but wisdom and moral courage that went far deeper than simple rule-following or fear of consequences. Yasmin's integrity was not based on external rewards or punishments, but on an internal compass that remained steady regardless of external circumstances. I have subjected you to a terrible ordeal based on my own paranoia and past betrayals, Ahmed said. How can I possibly make amends for what I have put you through? Yasmin wiped her eyes and returned to her chair. You can start by understanding that not everyone in your life is trying to take advantage of you, Mr. Al-Rashid. You have surrounded yourself with walls and tests and surveillance because you have been hurt, but those same protections are preventing you from experiencing the trust and loyalty that you are looking for. Her words were gentle but penetrating, cutting through years of defensive thinking with simple truth. Ahmed realized that his efforts to protect himself from betrayal had created a prison that kept out not just those who might harm him, but also those who might genuinely care about him. You are right, he admitted. I have become so focused on protecting myself from those who might betray me that I have forgotten how to recognize and value those who would never do so. I understand why you felt you needed to test me, Yasmin continued, but I hope you can now see that the kind of character you were looking for cannot be created by tests or surveillance. It either exists or it doesn't, and it reveals itself through consistent actions over time, not through artificial situations designed to create temptation. Ahmed nodded, understanding that Yasmin was not just talking about honesty, but about a fundamental approach to life that prioritized integrity over advantage, principle over profit, and genuine relationship over strategic positioning. There is something else I need to tell you, Ahmed said. The test you passed today was not just about honesty or integrity. It was the most comprehensive evaluation of character I have ever conducted, and you have demonstrated qualities that I had begun to believe did not exist. Yasmin listened quietly as Ahmed continued. I have tested many people over the years, and every single one has eventually failed when the stakes became high enough or the temptation became irresistible. You are the first person who has maintained complete integrity, even when faced with overwhelming temptation and apparent injustice. I'm not special, Mr. Al-Rashid, Yasmin said simply. There are many honest people in the world. Perhaps you have been looking in the wrong places or testing for the wrong things. Ahmed realized that she was probably right. His focus on protecting himself from betrayal had led him to seek relationships with people who were attracted to his wealth and power, rather than those who valued honesty and integrity above material gain. What you have shown me today, Ahmed continued, is not just that you are trustworthy, but that you possess the kind of character that makes trust possible in the first place. You have integrity that does not depend on circumstances, wisdom that goes beyond mere intelligence, and moral courage that remains steady even under extreme pressure. Yasmin was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What happens now, Mr. Al-Rashid? Do I still have a position in your household?" Ahmed realized that despite everything she had been through, Yasmin was still primarily concerned about her ability to support her family and fulfill her responsibilities. Even after discovering that she had been subjected to a manipulative test, her focus remained on practical concerns rather than on her own emotional wounds or desires for apology or compensation. "Yasmin," Ahmed said carefully, "I would like to offer you something very different from a housekeeping position." She looked at him with surprise and curiosity. "I have been looking for someone I could trust completely to help me manage my personal affairs and represent my interests in situations that require absolute discretion and integrity. It would be a position that would allow you to use your legal training and language skills, while providing compensation that would enable you to support your family and perhaps eventually return to your studies." Yasmin's eyes widened as she processed what Ahmed was offering. "You would trust me with such responsibilities after subjecting me to such an elaborate test of my character. I am offering you this position precisely because of how you responded to that test," Ahmed replied. "You have proven that you possess something rarer than intelligence or education or professional skills. You have demonstrated the kind of character that makes genuine trust possible." For the first time since entering the study, Yasmin smiled. "I would be honored to accept such a position, Mr. Al-Rashid, but I have one condition." Ahmed was intrigued. "What condition?" "No more tests," she said firmly. "Either you trust me or you don't. But I will not work for someone who continues to subject me to elaborate evaluations of my character." Ahmed found himself laughing for the first time in months. "Agreed," he said. "No more tests. From now on, our relationship will be based on mutual trust and respect." As they shook hands to formalize their new arrangement, Ahmed realized that Yasmin had given him something far more valuable than he had given her. She had not just proven her integrity, she had shown him what genuine character looked like, and in doing so, had begun to heal the cynicism and distrust that had been poisoning his relationships for years. The test that Ahmed had designed to evaluate Yasmin's character had ultimately revealed more about his own limitations than about her integrity. In trying to protect himself from betrayal, he had created barriers that prevented genuine connection and trust. Yasmin's unwavering honesty and wisdom had not just passed his test. It had taught him that the security he was seeking could only come from learning to recognize and value the kind of character that made trust possible in the first place. Over the following months, Yasmin proved herself to be everything Ahmed had hoped to find in a trusted advisor and friend. Her legal training, combined with her integrity and cultural sensitivity, made her invaluable in managing his business and personal affairs. But more importantly, her presence in his life began to restore his faith in the possibility of genuine relationships based on mutual trust and respect, rather than strategic calculation and defensive positioning. The young woman who had passed the ultimate test of character had given Ahmed something far more valuable than honesty. She had given him hope that trust was still possible, and that genuine human connection could survive even in a world where wealth and power often corrupted the most fundamental relationships. In testing Yasmin's integrity, Ahmed had discovered not just an honest employee, but a teacher who would help him rebuild his capacity for trust, and perhaps eventually for the kind of genuine relationships that made wealth and success meaningful in the first place.